When did a gut feeling save your life? It was a regular Tuesday at Lincoln High, third period, when the fire alarm started going off. Everyone just rolled their eyes and started the usual drill. File out slowly, complain about the test we were going to miss, stand outside for 20 minutes while they checked everything. But something felt wrong right away. See, I knew our school's alarm system pretty well because my dad actually helped install it 5 years ago. He'd always complained about how cheap the district was, how they got the basic model that had these specific patterns for different emergencies. This alarm wasn't following any pattern. It was just this steady beep, no flashing lights either. And our janitor, Mr. Kim, wasn't outside directing traffic like he always did during drills. That guy was obsessed with safety protocols. He'd literally memorize where every kid was supposed to stand. I was walking with my chemistry class when I saw Trevor, our hall monitor type RA, just standing there looking confused. He had this clipboard he always carried, but he wasn't checking names off like usual. Even Mrs. Patterson seemed off. She kept looking at her phone instead of counting heads. That's when my stomach just dropped. Something screamed at me that this wasn't right. So I told Mrs. Patterson I had to use the bathroom real quick. She waved me off without even looking up. Instead of heading to the restrooms, I booked it straight to the main office. The secretary, Miss Gonzalez, was still at her desk typing away. If this was a real emergency, she'd be gone already. Hey, I think something's wrong with the fire alarm, I said, trying not to sound crazy. It doesn't sound right, and Mr. Kim isn't outside. She barely looked up. Honey, go back to your class lineup. It's just a drill, but I couldn't shake it. Can you just check the security panel, please? My dad helped install the system, and he always said, fine, fine. She rolled her eyes and walked over to this big control panel on the wall. I watched, her face change as she stared at the screen. That's weird, she muttered, pressing some buttons. The alarm wasn't triggered from here. She called over Mr. Rodriguez, the vice principal, who came rushing over. They started whispering and pressing more buttons. Then Mr. Rodriguez grabbed his radio. All staff code black, locked down immediately. This is not a drill. My blood went cold. Code black meant active threat. Within seconds, the real alarm started blaring. Different pattern, flashing lights, the works. Miss Gonzalez pushed me into the inner office and locked the door. Through the window, I could see teachers rushing kids back inside. Pure panic on their faces. The hallways went from empty to chaos in like 30 seconds. Then I heard Mr. Rodriguez on his radio again. We've got him. North entrance. Subject in custody. Later, we found out some former student named Alex had downloaded this app that could trigger fake fire alarms. He'd been planning this for weeks. Set off the fake alarm to clear the hallways. Then he was going to come through the side door near the gym with a backpack full of weapons. But because I caught it early, security checked the cameras and saw him lurking around the north entrance 15 minutes before he planned to come in. It was a typical Tuesday at Lincoln High, third period, when the fire alarm suddenly started blaring. Most students groaned, bracing for the usual drill, filing out slowly, complaining about missed tests, and standing outside for what felt like forever. But from the first beep, something felt off to me. See, my dad had helped install our school's alarm system 5 years ago, and he was always griping about how cheap the district had been. The alarm had specific patterns for different emergencies, and this one didn't match any. Instead of the usual rhythmic alarm, this was a steady, monotonous beep. No flashing lights either. And our janitor, Mr. Kim, who was obsessive about safety protocols, wasn't where he normally would be directing traffic. This was unsettling. Normally, Mr. Kim knew exactly where every student should stand and made sure everything flowed smoothly. Walking with my chemistry class, I spotted Trevor, the RA and hall monitor, just standing there looking confused. He had a clipboard, but wasn't checking names or organizing the students like usual. Even Mrs. Patterson, our teacher, seemed distracted, staring more at her phone than at the class. Suddenly, my stomach dropped. My gut screamed that something was wrong. I told Mrs. Patterson I needed a quick bathroom break. She waved me off without even looking up. Instead of heading for the restroom, I sprinted straight to the main office. Miss Gonzalez, the secretary, was still at her desk, typing away. In a real emergency, she would have been out already. Hey, something's wrong with the fire alarm, I said, trying not to seem crazy. It doesn't sound right, and Mr. Kim's not outside. She barely looked up. Honey, go back to class. It's just a drill. I begged, can you please check the security panel? My dad helped install it. With an impatient eye roll, she walked over to the control panel on the wall. I watched her expression change as she stared at the screen. That's weird, she muttered, pressing buttons frantically. The alarm hadn't been triggered from there. She called over Mr. Rodriguez, the vice principal, who rushed over immediately. They whispered, tapped buttons, then he grabbed his radio. All staff. Code. Black. Lockdown immediately. This is not a drill. My blood ran cold. Code Black meant active threat. Suddenly, the real alarm sounded. A completely different pattern, flashing lights, sirens blaring. Miss Gonzalez shoved me into the inner office and locked the door behind us. I watched through the office window as teachers hurried students back inside, faces pale with panic. Within 30 seconds, the quiet hallways turned into full-blown chaos. Then, from the radio, Mr. Rodriguez's voice came again. We've got him. North entrance. Subject in custody. Later, we learned that a former student named Alex had used an app to trigger fake fire alarms. His plan was to clear the school, then enter through the side door near the gym, carrying a backpack loaded with weapons. Because I trusted my gut and acted, security reviewed the cameras and caught him lurking near the north entrance, 15 minutes before his planned attack. My quick instincts literally saved lives that day. Story 2 at the airport. The agent said, I'm sorry, but there's no ticket under your name. My wife shrugged and said coldly, Of course, we only booked for the family. My mother-in-law laughed. Maybe you can take a cheap bus and catch up? I quietly walked away. Hours later, their faces turned pale. Chapter 1. The Airport Betrayal. The terminal buzzed with holiday energy, families hugging, kids tugging at suitcases, overhead announcements calling out boarding groups. I stood in line with my wife, daughter, and her parents, feeling that faint excitement that always came with travel. When we reached the counter, I slid my passport across with a smile. The agent typed, frowned, typed again. Then she looked up, her voice neutral. I'm sorry, sir. There's no ticket under your name. I blinked. There must be a mistake. We booked as a family. Before the agent could respond, my wife's hand landed casually on the counter. Her voice was cold, sharp. Of course there's no ticket. We only booked for the family. Her mother chuckled. Beside her. Maybe you can take a cheap bus and catch up with us. Oh, wait. She gave a mocking laugh. You won't even know where we're staying. My daughter, confused, looked up at me. Daddy? She whispered. But my wife just herded her along, flashing the boarding passes for herself, our child, and her parents. Stood frozen, my own family, leaving me stranded. The agent's sympathetic eyes cut into me. Sir. I forced a tight smile, picked up my passport, and stepped aside. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply walked away, phone already in my hand, because they thought they'd humiliated me. They thought they'd cut me out. But what they didn't know was that hours later, their world would collapse. Chapter 2. The Setup. I left the terminal, but not with despair, with clarity. Because the truth was, this trip wasn't theirs to control. It was mine. I had paid for the hotel. I had arranged the car rentals. I had even set up the excursions. Everything was under my name, my credit card, my accounts. But I'd stayed quiet when they arrogantly took over the flights. I let my wife parade around, acting like she held all the power while her mother cackled by her side. They thought I'd be stranded, that I'd crawl after them like some beggar. What they didn't realize was that the moment their flight landed, their nightmare would begin. I booked a last-minute flight to the same destination discreetly a few hours later. I didn't need to be on the same plane. I needed them to think I was gone, powerless, humiliated. As I sat at my gate waiting to board, I opened my laptop and logged into the travel accounts. A few keystrokes, a few clicks, and everything began shifting. Hotel reservations canceled, effective immediately. Rental cars gone, reservations nullified. Excursion bookings transferred to a new name, mine. And just for good measure, I added an alert to the hotel system. If anyone under my wife's or her mother's name attempts to check in, deny entry, fraud flag. By the time their plane touched down, they'd walk into a vacation that no longer existed. And I would be there waiting, not to argue, not to beg, but to watch as their smug laughter turned into panic. Chapter 3. The Vacation That Wasn't. When their flight landed, my wife texted me a single emoji. Airplane smiling face, smug like she'd just won a war. I didn't reply. I was already checked into their hotel suite, sipping champagne on the balcony with the best view in the resort. My reservation was untouched because it was under my name. Theirs canceled. By the time they arrived, dragging luggage and laughter through the marble lobby, I was watching from above. Reservation for Anderson. My mother-in-law chirped proudly. The clerk typed, frowned, and tried again. Then he shook his head. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your reservation has been canceled. Her face went red. What do you mean, canceled? My son-in-law booked this. Correct, the clerk said calmly, and he canceled it this morning. Fraud alert was attached to the name. We cannot rebook you under this account. My wife's head whipped around, scanning the lobby, searching for me. She didn't know I was 10 floors up, watching their panic like it was a private show. They argued for 20 minutes. No luck. Every nearby hotel was fully booked. The holiday season had them completely packed. By sundown, the laughter that echoed at the airport had turned into bickering. My mother-in-law's voice screeched about incompetence. My wife hissed back about fixing it. And my daughter, she sat on her suitcase, confused, watching the family who promised her the perfect vacation fall apart. And me? I just raised my glass, smiling because this was only the beginning. Chapter 4. The Dominoes Fall. After being tossed out of the hotel lobby like uninvited guests, they tried to salvage their pride. Fine, my wife snapped. We'll get the car. We'll drive somewhere. Better. But when they marched to the rental desk, I was already a step ahead. Reservation for Anderson, she said again. The clerk looked apologetic. I'm sorry, but that reservation was canceled earlier today, and all other vehicles are sold out. Holiday. Season. My mother-in-law slammed her hand on the counter. This is ridiculous. Call the manager. The manager arrived and confirmed it. Reservation canceled by the account holder. That account holder? Me. By now, their perfect plan was unraveling thread by thread, luggage in hand. They dragged themselves, outside into the humid night, arguing in circles. My daughter's small voice cut through their shouting, Mom, where are we going to sleep? Silence. They didn't have an answer. Meanwhile, I was already ahead because the fun part of their vacation, the excursions they bragged about to everyone back home, were now mine. Private yacht tour booked under my name, 5-star dining reservations, mine, sunset helicopter ride, mine. And tomorrow, when they turned up to claim their spots, they'd be laughed out of line. I leaned back on the balcony of my suite, watching the fireworks from the resort beach. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in my own marriage. Control. This wasn't revenge for the ticket stunt at the airport. This was justice for every sneer, every insult, every time they treated me as disposable. And the best part, it was only day 1. Chapter 5. Desperation. By the second day, their glamour had peeled away like cheap paint. My wife's designer dress was wrinkled. Her mother's perfect hair was a frizzed mess. They sat on their luggage in the sticky heat outside a tourist office, calling every number they knew. Can you send money? I overheard her beg on a public payphone. Please, just enough for a hotel. He canceled everything. But the family they thought would swoop in to save them too embarrassed to be associated with the scandal. Word had already started spreading on social media. Rich families stranded abroad after scamming their own son-in-law. Screenshots of their smug photos at the airport captioned with updates about their downfall were being shared gleefully. By evening, they tried to bluff their way into a cheaper hotel. Do you know who we are? My mother-in-law barked at the clerk. Yes, he said calmly, nodding toward the screen behind him. You're the family who abandoned their husband at the airport. It's gone viral. No vacancies for you. Their faces turned the color of ash. Meanwhile, my daughter had called me from her mother's phone, whispering, Dad, can I stay with you? I don't want to be here anymore. I told her where to meet me, and within an hour she was at my suite, wide-eyed at the difference. Room service trays, soft music, a warm bed, waiting. She clung to me, tears streaming down her cheeks. I knew you wouldn't leave me, Dad. That night, I tucked her in while her mother and grandmother slept outside a bus terminal, sweating in the eyes, humid dark. And in the morning, I smiled to myself because the real punishment hadn't even begun. This wasn't just about canceled hotels and cars. It was about showing them that when you strip away the money and the arrogance, they had nothing left. Chapter 6. The Final Blow. The trip had eaten through their dignity like acid. But the last act that would happen at the same airport where this all began. When their vacation was over, they stumbled back to the terminal, sunburned, exhausted, dragging broken luggage and wearing the same clothes for days. My wife's expensive sandals had snapped and she hobbled barefoot across the floor while her mother cursed at baggage handlers. At the gate, the airline clerk scanned their passports. Then she frowned. "I'm sorry. There are no returned tickets under your names." Their jaws dropped. "What do you mean, no tickets?" my mother-in-law screeched. "We booked them." The clerk checked again, then held up the screen. "Sir, ma'am, the tickets were canceled by the primary account holder 2 days ago." I stepped out from the VIP lounge, perfectly rested, my daughter holding my hand. Primary account holder, that would be me. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd of waiting passengers. Some even pulled out their phones. They recognized them from the viral posts about the airport betrayal. Now, here they were stranded again. My wife's face flushed crimson. You can't do this to us," she shrieked. "Oh, I already did," I replied calmly. "This is just the consequence of your choices. You wanted me out of the family trip. You got it permanently." Security came over as the scene grew louder. My wife and her mother tried to protest, but their credit cards had been flagged from failed attempts all week. No tickets, no money, no backup. Meanwhile, I boarded first class with my daughter, the staff treating us with quiet respect. As the doors closed behind me, the last thing I saw was their desperate faces pressed against the glass of the departure gate, helpless, humiliated, and exposed for exactly who they were. For once, the world wasn't laughing at me. It was laughing at them. Epilogue: the lasting consequences. Back home, the story didn't stay at the airport. Clips of their public humiliation spread online like wildfire. Strangers shared it with captions like "Karma at $30,000 FT," and "This is what arrogance buys you." For weeks, my ex-wife and her mother couldn't step outside without whispers following them. Friends who once clung to their wealth suddenly vanished, unwilling to be associated with their disgrace. Invitations stopped arriving. The fancy social circles they had flaunted were closed to them forever. My ex-wife filed for divorce, but with documented proof of abandonment, viral evidence of her cruelty, and testimonies from witnesses, custody was granted to me without a fight. The court awarded me the house and financial control, citing her pattern of reckless and negligent behavior. My daughter blossomed in the aftermath. She no longer flinched when her grandmother's name was mentioned, no longer carried the quiet weight of shame in public. At school, she proudly told her friends, "My dad stood up for me." As for my ex-wife and her mother, they became cautionary, tales reduced to renting a small apartment, arguing over bills, and watching their once polished image crumble. The lesson: revenge isn't always about fire and fury. Sometimes the greatest revenge is restraint, letting people write their own downfall with arrogance and cruelty, then showing the world their true colors. They thought they erased me from the family picture. Instead, they erased themselves. And the best part, I didn't just walk away from that airport as a humiliated man. I walked away as a father who had won everything that truly mattered. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Tell us what you think about this story in the comments below. Like the story.